Hey folks, this is Matthew Krause, and you are listening to the podcast Working Drummer. Today, I get a chance to sit down and talk with David Northrup. After spending 9 years drumming for Travis Tritt and building a strong reputation for himself, David now continues to stay busy with the Oak Ridge Boys. David also keeps a regular schedule of drum clinics and recording sessions throughout the year. Add to all this, the responsibility of raising a family makes David a very busy man. I just want to thank him for taking the time to share with us the wisdom that he's gained and the lessons he's learned through the peaks and valleys of his career. As always, you can go to workingdrummer.net. You can see pictures of David that we've included and all the other interviews that we've done. You can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. We also have a YouTube page where we're including new videos all the time. We're very excited that we've been asked to get involved with the Nashville Drummers Jam. For those of you who don't know, please go to Nashville Drummers Jam on Facebook. Monday, December 14th is the show here in Nashville at the Exit Inn. I think I'm supposed to hit record. Actually, that's recording that. I've got that.
Hey.
we were talking about, to up to speed here, we were talking about the Greg Bissonette Clinic and how entertaining and sometimes funny he can be with his voices and stuff like that. And the few interviews I've had with players that do clinics on a regular basis talk about the idea that part of it has to be entertaining.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, there's the educational component. But, you know, sometimes people are there to be entertained. And I know you do that a lot. When I was kind of doing some more research on you, the YouTube videos and the clinics, man, it was awesome.
Yeah,
is there a thing that you do? Is there like a formula that you use when you do clinics?
No, at first, I had a whole printout format that I would try to follow.
Yeah.
And I found that generally what takes place is I allow the Q&A, the question and answer thing, to take control of the flow of the clinic. There's certain things that I start with and I talk about and I perform along with tracks and whatnot. But I think the most important thing, at least in my experience, is just to be genuine and offer good, honest, solid advice, you know.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, people feel connected with you, you know.
And so if the questions dictate the direction of the clinic, it's going to be unique to that group of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
You know, so it's always going to be based on, a lot of time, demographic as far as, you know, if I'm doing a college clinic at a university, obviously it's going to be a little bit more sophisticated, if you will. If I'm doing a music store clinic and there's a broader age bracket, then, you know, I have to address that too, you know, so everybody can kind of get something from it.
You're doing the theme to Sesame Street.
Yeah.
You know, as tracks. And
Sure, yeah.
whatever it takes. Guys, here's the Wiggles. Who loves the Wiggles? So what's going on with you now? Who are you out with now? Who are you out with?
The Oak Ridge Boys. I've been touring with them for about a year and a half now, and it's been a blast.
And I saw you, it seemed like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
At the Strawberry Fest. So that must have been a really new thing.
Yeah, it was. That was, I think, February or March, and I had just got the gig.
Okay.
Scotty Simpson, great bass player. He and I toured together with Travis Tritt for 9 years. I was with Travis from 2000 to 2009. And Scotty had got the gig a year before me and had given me a call at one point and said, you know, they're thinking about making a change in the drum chair position. Would you be interested? And I thought, well, you know, an opportunity to play with him again would be great because we're, you know how the bass and the drum relationship is, not only as musicians, but generally, you know, there's a camaraderie there.
Right.
And he and I were just, you know, so tight with the Travis thing, the Travis gigs for so long. So I didn't think much of it. And then 6 months later, when they actually did make the change, he called me and out of the blue, and everything went down so fast. You know, I was just offered the gig, which was really nice.
Yeah.
And at first I was really reluctant because they work so much, and I didn't. And at that point,
ask why.
Yeah, I was at I was at a point where I was teaching in town, and I was working with Connie Smith, Opry, just an amazing experience, and I was really trying to stay in town more and do more sessions and that sort of thing. So I was a little reluctant, and then they started talking to me about what they offer business wise, financially. It's ridiculous. Because they work so much, and then they offer health insurance, which is insane. Yeah, health insurance for my own family. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then there's Christmas bonuses and all this other stuff, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So it was sort of like, if I don't take this gig, I'm an idiot. And not that it's all about dollars and cents, but at my point in my career, I have a family.
Right.
And it offered us the opportunity for my wife to stay home full time because it had insurance.
Yeah.
And because they work so much, this is probably the best financial gig I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I laugh about it because, my bosses are, in their 60s and 70s. Yeah. And they pay probably as good, if not better, than some of the current big country acts.
Yeah.
And that's just because they like and appreciate the people that they hire, and they want them to stay around.
Well, I can say, if I could interject here, that when I saw you at the Strawberry Fest, I was there for the week with my group playing in one of the tents with other groups, and so every day we could go over and see who was playing. And it was... got a chance to see some of Easton Corbin with David Black playing drums, so some new artists and some other, just all over the map. And so I had never seen the Oak Ridge Boys. And the band was incredible. You guys were killing it. Yeah. I was like, you four guys up front, could you move a little bit?
It's really an exceptional band.
I mean, with no disrespect to your bosses.
Yeah.
But, man, you guys were just incredible. And I was like, holy moly. And the name escapes me of the drummer I was playing with down there, the other drummer in the band that I was playing with. Who knew you.
Oh, David Hughes.
David Hughes, sweetheart, great drummer.
Great friend,
It was fun to hang with him and get to know him. And he brought me backstage, and we kind of... I think that's where I formally met you.
Yeah.
And then I remember there was another time I saw you with Travis, and the group Savannah Jack opened up for you guys, and it was probably around 2009 or so.
Yeah, it could have been.
It was outside. It was extremely hot. I almost passed out.
Wow.
And you offered to buy my snare drum. It was a Gretsch copper 6.5 by 14.
Really?
Yeah.
And you didn't sell it?
I did.
No. No kidding.
How much do you want for that snare drum?
It probably sounded amazing. That's probably why.
And if the heat stroke was real, I might have taken you up on the offer.
That's cool.
So I did recall that. I was like, I have seen David a couple times, and then we had some mutual friends. Just being Nashville, being that it was. But anyways. My point is, it sounded great.
Oh, thank you.
I just couldn't stop watching you guys play. It was really good.
I'm really fortunate because, everybody is just a smoking player. Mm-hmm. And, everyone's a seasoned pro, so they just do the gig. There's no drama.
That's great.
It's just go to work. Everyone's grateful that they still get to play for a living. Mm-hmm. So there's that appreciation factor. There's no ego. There's no attitude anywhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone just does their job. It's probably the coolest gig I've ever had.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I know you said when they first approached you, you weren't sure. Well, was there still some? I mean, I can guess why, but was there still, after they talked money and insurance and all those important things that are necessary when you have a family and you're doing all these things, but was there something else that's still in the back of your mind? Is this the right thing, or was it just like, I got to do this?
Yeah, I wasn't sure because of the time that it was going to require for me to be away from home. And to just give you an example, the most I ever worked with Travis Tritt in the 9 years that I was with him, I think the first full year of touring in 2001, we did maybe 101 shows. And that was with TV stuff. And then after that, we went from 101 maybe down to 60 or 70.
Okay.
So it was probably the best part-time job you could have, and it paid very well. There was a few years where we were on salary, so we were getting paid regardless of when we worked.
Right.
And that afforded me the opportunity to be in town more, to do sessions, to do clinics while I was on the road, and when I was in town booking stuff independently. And then I sort of got into producing, not by it sort of happened. Just from experience of doing a lot of session work. It wasn't anything that I ever set out to do. So that was a really cool few years of a lot of opportunity and stylistically being able to do a lot of different stuff. So when I found out the amount of touring dates they did, I thought, I don't know if I could do that. It's such a grind. And then I did the math and I was like, wow, this would be like financially just a huge blessing for my family, And I talked with my wife a lot, and we prayed about it, because that's what we do. We want to make sure that we're where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And the opportunity for her to be able to be home with the kids, for us, is a huge luxury, and to have one of us around all the time, at least one of us bringing up the kids is super important.
Yeah.
So that made sense in the fact that, she has a really great job, and if she worked and I worked as much as I'm working with the Oaks, financially, it'd be like, holy crap, it would be amazing. But that's really not what we're about. Who would be raising our kids?
And you are in a similar situation as I am. Two boys. Mine are 10 and 13. Yours are 13 and 18?
12 and 18, yep.
12 and 18.
Matthew and Miles. Yeah.
Okay. So that time goes by. 13 years has flown by for me.
Absolutely.
And so I know for you, you've seen it. 18. Is he gone next year?
Yeah, he'll be graduating. Hopefully not too far. We're hopefully going to keep him local when he goes to college. That's the plan anyways.
Yeah. So that is a short window of time. And so whatever it takes, it's almost like the standard of living. It's not what you've got. It's experiencing that. And this is the time that you've got your kids, because after that,
they're out doing their own thing.
That's amazing. So she's not working.
She works part-time, 1 day a week. She's a licensed optician, so she works just 1 day a week to keep her foot in the door at her work. And she has to do what's called continuing education hours each year to keep her license.
Gotcha.
So that's good for us. And we work that out, schedule-wise. And the boys are older, so it's a little easier.
Right. Yeah, that works. When I was traveling a lot, when my boys were really small, that was tough. That was tough. Now they're they get up and make their own breakfast and are out the door. And
beautiful thing, huh?
You're just like
little independent there.
Yeah, right. Very, very much so, just by necessity. I noticed on the Oak Ridge Boys schedule, there's a theater that they play.
Yes.
In Missouri.
Branson.
In Branson.
Yep.
Does that help the touring? Are you able to bring your family out there, or at least your wife? Or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last year was the first time, obviously, I was doing a lot of those theater dates, and it's generally in the fall. I think we do 30 dates throughout the year there. It's the Oak Ridge Boys Theater.
Right.
Which that's helpful.
When they found that theater, they thought, we should play here.
Yeah.
It's got our name on it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So they have
Seems like a fit.
a deal worked out with, obviously, the theater, and they use their name and promote it and whatnot. During fall break last year, we're up there we're generally up there from Tuesday to Thursday. We'll do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Go from Branson to a Friday, Saturday gig, maybe a Sunday gig. Come back into town Monday for a few hours, and then leave Monday night and go back to Branson.
Okay.
And at first I thought that was going to become kind of a grind, but I'm sort of used to it. Everyone has their own space. They take care of us. Everyone has their own room. So there's that. But during fall break last year, we drove up as a family, and there's a lot of things to do up there. There's a big theme park. We went to the theme park during the day. Yeah. We went to another place that had go-karts. So we just basically had family vacation during the day, and then Dad went to work at night at the theater playing drums. I mean, what a bummer, right? So it was really cool. So that helps out. The other really awesome thing about the Oaks gig that I've never experienced in any other situation is they're so family-oriented that they allow family members, if there's a short run of dates, if you want to bring your kids out, because there's room on the bus, you can have family out there, which is so cool. With other gigs, that was never even a consideration. Right. So, my boys on occasion, if we just have a Friday, Saturday gig or a Saturday, Sunday gig, they can come out because there's some extra bunks, and they come hang on the bus and, sit and lay in the bunk and watch DVDs. Yeah, so it's
experience.
And the important thing, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, and I think it'll mean more to our children when they're older, but they see Dad loving what he does for a living.
Yes.
And knowing that it's a possibility, that if you really work hard and pursue something that you're passionate about, that you were born to do, that your quality of life is, amazing.
Right.
It's not about getting rich. Obviously, if I wanted to get rich, I would have, chose a different profession. And,
podcast.
Yeah. Or, growing up, reading Modern Drummer magazine, you see all those ads and, endorsement ads, and you say, man, that guy's got to be rich. Yeah. That guy's got to be this. Well, if you're in a band, sure, you're probably loaded. But if you're a sideman, that's not the reality of it.
Yeah.
You don't do it for the money.
Exactly. Exactly. I also think about all the time I could have saved by knowing I could have said the Oaks and not the Oak Ridge Boys. I've added 2 more syllables to that.
Oh, my
but
gosh.
I've learned today that
the Oaks.
The Oaks. I got so much more extra time on my hands.
Yeah, there you go. Or you can abbreviate ORBS when I'm, texting somebody or emailing them. How
long have those guys been around? I mean, when did they start?
Insane. 42 years. This is their 42nd year. So that's, I think,
1974.
Yeah, 73, 74 of this, culmination of guys. These 4 guys. The Oaks have actually been around. The Oak Ridge Boys have been around since the 40s. Obviously, not these guys. Okay. And there's a great history about them. They used to be the Tennessee Clodhoppers, or the Georgia Clodhoppers. Okay. And they were a gospel quartet in an Oak Ridge during World War II. The Manhattan Project, when they were building the atomic bomb, they were allowed to come in on the weekends and entertain those people that were working on that project, which no one could go in and out except for them. So because of their popularity of going there, they changed the name from the Georgia Clodhoppers to the Oak Ridge Boys, which was a good move.
Yeah. And do you guys ever play any of those old songs or hear something from the original group?
Some of the gospel stuff, yeah. In fact, their latest CD is a gospel album of all the old traditional hymns.
Wow,
they've never done that, so it's kind of interesting. And we do a few of those in the show. Yeah. I grew up in upstate New York, Syracuse, New York area, a small town outside called Chittenango. Mm-hmm. Started playing in 1980, so I've been doing it for 35 years.
Wow.
And played all through school, and was, the big fish in the little pond. I didn't really work too hard at it, and I had other interests. I was involved in sports. And it wasn't until I went to my first year of college for something completely different that I realized that music was what I wanted to do. So I left college and started studying privately with some great local drummers. One was Frank Briggs, who lives out in L.A., monster drummer. He teaches. He's got an online drum. It's called the Drum School, online school. So I studied with Frank, and Frank was a really valuable asset to my career, not only just from studying with him, but he was is a personal friend, and in staying in contact throughout my whole career, he's always given me great advice, music, business advice, and then life advice.
Oh yeah.
I also studied with a great drummer named Wilby Fletcher, great jazz drummer. So, I did sort of a different road as far as my career. I didn't go to music school. I just really studied with a lot of different players and practiced a lot. The School of Hard Knocks, I guess.
Sure.
If you will. Ended up moving to Central Florida for a few years. Studied down there. Had a great opportunity to work with a guitarist named Les Dudeck.
Yeah.
And worked on an album with Jeff Pocaro. After Jeff Pocaro passed away, I got called in to finish
tell me about that.
It was amazing. I just happened to be playing a club on an off night in Lakeland, Florida, of all places, and he happened to just come in and saw the band play and got up and sat in, and we were playing this groove. It was like the halftime shuffle thing.
Yeah.
And he immediately turned around and looked at me, and I was like, oh, gosh, well, either he's digging this or he really thinks I stink.
Well, who was this? This was
Les Dudeck, yeah.
Okay.
And we just ended up sitting down at the end of the night and talked and kind of hit it off. And I had known about him. I didn't know to the extent of all the things that he had done.
And I have to admit, I'm not familiar with him.
He, I think the first claim to fame that he had was he actually played the guitar solo on Ramblin' Man.
Oh,
he was like 19, something really young like that. Everyone thought it was Dickie Betts, but it was actually Les.
Okay.
And then he went on to play with Steve Miller and Boz Scaggs, and then got a solo career on CBS and put out some great records. One of those guys where just was so close to becoming a household name, but just great musician records. I mean, cream of the crop. Gary Malaber, Dave Hungate played on Carmine Appice, Porcaro, David Paich, just L.A. who's who of players back then. So, anyways, I had a chance to work with him, and that was a huge education. I was in my early 20s, and he had just moved back from L.A. to Central Florida, and I learned so much about what the drummer's role, and him and Jeff Pocaro were very good friends in the early 70s, just before Toto actually, formed or became, popular and got their deal. They were both on the same label, CBS.
Gotcha.
So it was really somewhat surreal, to sit and have a perspective from him.
And do you remember some of the things that he advised?
Yeah, he talked about how Jeff played in phrasings. Everything was in phrasings, where we would evaluate some of his tracks, and he said, see how he's lifting up the hi-hat at the end of these four bars? He's playing in a phrase. He's ending that phrase, or he'd pick the hi-hat up to introduce another phrase, not necessarily doing a fill. But he in studying Jeff's playing, not all the time, but a great deal of the time, he'd play in 4 or 8 bar phrases.
Yeah.
And he would just do little tasteful hi-hat things, or just small, minute things, which, we know now as drummers.
Sure.
But he would play in those phrasings just to be able to introduce different sections subtly.
Subtly, very subtly.
And for a young 20-year-old kid,
right.
I was doing a lot of that, just mimicking his playing, but not knowing the reasoning behind all that. So that was real eye-opening. And the other cool thing that during the sessions that I worked with, on that record. It was called Deeper Shades of Blue. I was talking to Les about Jeff's equipment, and Jeff endorsed Pearl drums, so I just assumed that he used Pearl on the record. And he's like, no, man. He showed me some pictures. Well, he had this Gretsch kit, and I was like, wow, that was the first time my eyes sort of opened up. All the time that I was really listening to him on all the different records that he played on, and the sound that I was gravitating to wasn't Pearl, which I love Pearl drums, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Pearl drums. It was in fact Gretsch. So that was that's primarily the reason why I play Gretsch drums now, was the sound, and not only him. It's like all the early J.R. Robinson stuff that he did with Michael Jackson. Those are Gretsch drums. Right. Steve Ferrone, Vinny, even when he was using Yamaha drums, and I love Yamaha drums.
Well, and that's the thing, I think, and we talked about this before, where technology is getting to the point where the playing field is being leveled in many ways. And the way the Japanese were making drums and marketing drums had its appeal, and it worked very well. Certain drums, and especially in this era, in the 70s and 80s, I think you had a certain thing that you could only get from manufacturers like Gretsch or Ludwig, and still to this day, for sure. But it wasn't a surprise to me to find out that Vinny was using Gretsch in the studio when he was endorsed by Yamaha, and then he endorses Gretsch, and then so it changes all over, and you can hear. I did a session a couple years ago. I walked in, and there was a Pearl kit. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it sounded incredible.
Oh, yeah.
For that room, it was the house kit, and we were going to do a whole record, and I thought, well, I'll check out the house kit and then see if I want to bring my Gretches in. Boom, boom. Nope, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah.
And it sounded just incredible. But I get it. Why at that time. So was there, on the record, Jeff had played some of the tracks?
He had played all the tracks, and the album didn't get finished because Dudeck got called out on the road with Stevie Nicks. So we put the record on the back burner, and when he was finally ready to finish the record, there was a title cut that he had to have cut. He had to track still. Jeff had passed away.
Yeah. So
he had one song that needed to be tracked, and I was able to do that, and it was really interesting. Jeff was such a influence and such a hero of mine that it was the closest thing that I could get to meeting him, and never met him. And I would have much rather had met him, but this was sort of God's way of saying, hey, I know how much he meant to you here. This is for you. The other really amazing thing was during, as I said earlier, I had a chance to become close with Les. And so while they were mixing, he let me tag along. Yeah. And when they were doing drum tracks, mixing drum tracks, I remember being in the control room at Greg Wright Studios in Altamont Springs, Orlando, Florida area. They had the drums all pulled up, and it was like he was there. And at the end of the track, you could hear him put his sticks down, and you can hear him breathe and say, yeah, that's cool. Let's check that out. In his low, deep voice. So I'm just sitting there in the control room. And, he had been gone a year. He'd only been gone, a year. This was in '93. And I was just like, this is amazing. It was like his spirit was there. Yeah. So it was huge thing for me.
Right. It's like that lost recording of a speech by Abraham Lincoln or something. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
They captured that.
Yeah.
Or them being right there. And it had to be in the studio that clear sound.
Oh, it was amazing. It was
That's amazing, man.
Yeah, and as I get older, it's even more special to me to know that happened. I lived in Florida for 4 years. After I had done that, I actually was also working with this guy named Dennis Lee, who was another really
Yeah, that's who we were working with down at the Strawberry Fest.
and that's where you met David Hughes.
Yeah.
Dennis was also very instrumental in helping me get my act together, at that point. And we toured doing fairs and festivals all over the country. And I had met some people from Nashville doing those gigs, which was really cool. And it kind of helped me realize that my next move was gonna be Nashville.
Yeah.
And I felt like that in my spirit. I felt like that was inevitable. God was moving me here eventually, which was cool. So I moved to Nashville in 2000, and because of that, the Dudeck album credit, it opened some doors for me.
Oh, wow.
And I tried to stay in town. My whole thing was, this is my destiny. I'm going to be the next Paul Lime. Right. And I got some session work, and I got my butt handed to me.
Yeah.
I was so out of my league. I was so green.
How did you get the session work started, or was that as a result of the album credit?
Well, the album credit helped. I met some engineers and some players from L.A. that had moved here too.
Okay.
So the association with Dudeck and the association of playing on that album with Porcaro, that gave me some credibility. Mm-hmm. But my reading wasn't together. Mm-hmm. I was green. I needed more experience. I was 27, and I played a lot, and I had good time and good feel, but I loved to play. I was into Weckl and Garibaldi, and I still love those guys.
Yeah.
And on the other flip of the coin, I was and always will be, a student of Gadd and Porcaro and Russ Kunkel and the Murata brothers, the groove guys with facility, but just are so articulate and musical in their playing, much like Greg Bissonette, and know what to say and know when not to say stuff. And I was immature in that regard. Mm-hmm. So I think that affected me a little bit as far as not getting more follow-up calls and, not having my reading together. So it was very humbling. And I had to just really bear down and bust my butt when I finally was here and realized that there was some holes that I needed to fill with my abilities, really super important. My goal was to stay in town and do sessions because, shortly after moving here, my wife moved up from Florida and we got married and started a family. And I didn't want to be away from my kids. Yeah. So I stuck it out for about 4 years. And I was doing some road work. I had played on a few Joel Saunier records. Yeah. And so I was doing some tour dates with him. I was working with this really cool blues band. It was sort of a band project. It was called the Christian Hastings Band. Christian Hastings was this great young blues guitar player that lived here in town. And we had a band, and we played regionally and did a record with him. So that was real cool. And I had my drums and cartage, and I was sort of doing it. And in 2000, the bottom sort of fell out. The work kind of went down, and I was at the point where I need to do something. The recording scene was sort of shrinking in town. Yeah. Some of the A guys were doing the B work, and the B guys.
But you had moved here in 2000.
I had moved here in 95. Did I say 2000? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense now.
Yeah, I moved here in 95. Got the Travis Tritt gig in 2000. So almost 5 years to the day.
2000. Yeah. That's when that.
Yeah. So I had decided, well, you know what? I just got to try to make a living. So I started letting everybody know, and I had been here for 5 years, which was cool. So I knew a lot of people. Yeah. So I let a lot of folks know, hey, I'm looking to get a road gig. And most people at that point knew that I was trying to stay in town. So I was very fortunate to have some folks recommend me for some auditions. And I auditioned for a guy named Clay Davidson, and I didn't get the gig. I was told I was overqualified. I played too much like the record. I was too clean. They wanted somebody sloppier. And I told the manager, I was like, I can play worse, you know. Yeah. But that was all good. And then I auditioned for Pam Tillis. I lost that to Rich Redmond. Rich Redmond got that gig.
Right. That was one of his first gigs.
Yeah. And, you know, Rich is a great player and great personality. I think his personality just overwhelmed them. So, so he got that gig. And then I auditioned for Trisha Yearwood, and I was like the runner-up. At least the band leader, Johnny Garcia, at the end of the first day of auditions, he said, you know, you're the guy. She really loves your playing. And then Charlie Morgan, Elton John's drummer, came in and got the gig. You know, Elton John's drummer. And plus, Charlie's just a great player.
I missed him by this much. He was going to be playing with the Orleans.
Yes, I saw him play with the Orleans at the Opry. She's great. That band was awesome.
Well, I saw the Orleans, but Charlie wasn't on the gig. About 2 weeks ago, he was in a bicycle accident.
No.
And he's recovering, and I think he's going to be fine. But he cracked some bones in his eye socket and his head. So their original drummer, or the drummer that was before Charlie, was on the gig and did a great job.
Yeah.
And I met him. I can't remember his name. But he did a great job. But I miss Charlie just
hopefully he'll recover.
second.
Great.
Yeah.
Just a great drummer. And, man, it was so cool to finally to meet him. And I told him the story. I was like, hey, man, you got the gig from me. And he just sort of laughed. But, you know, it was a blessing in disguise because after that audition, I got an audition with Travis Tritt.
Yeah.
And had I got one of those gigs, I wouldn't have had such a great run because, you know, after I think 1 year, Trisha took 3 years off.
What was your state of mind, though, after those 3 auditions kind of
That's
went away?
a great question. I remember I had always been a fan of Trisha Yearwood, and still am. I love her music, and I love her songs that she's always had a great opportunity to record. And Sean Fichter was the drummer that was being replaced, and he's such a great player too, man. So just a groove and pocket for days, so tasteful. I remember, and at the time, I had a job. I had a day job, part-time job. I was a courier.
Okay.
So I drive around town in my courier truck.
You were a working drummer.
I was definitely a working drummer, you know, trying to feed the family.
Trademark.
I got a call on my cell phone, and I knew just by the tone of Johnny's voice I didn't get the gig.
Yeah.
So I remember going home.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, he goes, man, you know. So, you know, I remember, and this is God honest truth, I remember going home and I sat in our living room, nobody was there, and I prayed. And I said, you know, God, I know you got something else for me, but right now I'm really heartbroken. Just help me to be positive, to get through this. And I know that you have probably experienced this, and I know I experienced this when I first moved to town.
No, I've made all my auditions, man.
Well,
I know what you're talking about.
but you run into guys that are in this town that are just bitter, you know. And I think it's just the industry in general that you know, they don't feel that they got their due or their fair shake, and they're just, you know. And music is such a personal and spiritual thing. It's like just a spiritual form of communication that if someone has a bad vibe or just, you know, is bitter, it sort of comes out in their playing, it comes out in their just the hang, you know. And I'd been around some people like that, and I was like, man, I don't want, that's the furthest thing of who I am.
Well, going back to what you were saying about Rich Redmond, he
bitter. Rich is bitter. No, just no.
He personifies his playing. When you watch him play, if you've never met him before, you see him play, and then you meet him, the personalities are married.
Yeah.
And you see that in so many different players. I think our playing comes out so much. It's a reflection of our personality.
I would agree.
So much. At least for drummers that I know.
Absolutely.
You know, very much so.
Absolutely. Kenny Aronoff is a great example.
Yes.
And Greg Bissonette had talked about him in his clinic. He's like, you know, we are the focus of the stage to uplift everybody else and to drive the band. We are the focal point. And if you don't have the personality and the confidence to be able to drive and to hold it together. If you're a timid personality, you're going to play timid. It was a blessing in disguise that I didn't get those other gigs. And I was just really asking God to help me through that lull, because I wanted that gig. I loved Trisha Yearwood's music. I loved Paul Lime's playing and Eddie Bayer's playing on those tracks. And I was so close. It was, I had been in Nashville at 5 years. I was at the 5-year mark, and the fact that I even got an audition was unbelievable, So I was so close to achieving what I thought was, my ultimate gig. And then, I got the opportunity to audition for Travis, and that totally, from a career standpoint, took me from just, it was a catapult for me. It was definitely the gig that gave me credibility. Those other previous gigs, tragically, you don't even know who Clay Davidson is anymore. He doesn't exist. At that point, Pam Tillis had her band together, I think, for 2 years, and then let everybody go and put the new band together. And then after a year, Trisha took 3 years off. Well, I got the gig with Travis, and it ended up being a 9-year run.
Right.
And the other thing, working with him was a great challenge, because stylistically he covered so many genres. He could play R&B. It was a southern rock gig. There was some traditional country. There was some blues involved. And as an artist, he could sing his tail off every night. Really, the real deal.
There's lots of great videos too, and lots of great footage of you guys.
It was really an exceptional band. He also plays guitar. We would be reminded every night when he would do his acoustic set that he needed none of us. He could just sit there and just entertain and sing his tail off with an acoustic guitar. It was really, it was a great privilege to work with him, and it was a great opportunity growth-wise.
In what way?
Well, I know that having the experience and the confidence that I was able to build playing on stage with him as an artist and all the other great musicians in Travis's band allowed me to grow as a studio musician. My confidence level, and there was an edge that I was able to bring to doing sessions that I didn't have before, I don't think. And I think some of it had to do with confidence. Some of it had to do with, the credibility of who I was working for, because he's, an amazing artist. And, it's sort of unfortunate, but it is the business that, I don't want to say we get judged, but, people look at you from a different standpoint when you have a high-profile gig. Obviously, this town is filled with great players.
Right.
And I know, and it's not really based on playing ability, because everyone plays well. And it goes without saying, you have to play well.
Right.
You have to have a great personality. You have to be able to get along with people.
Yes.
A lot of it is luck of the draw, knowing the right person, being at the right place at the right time, and nurturing relationships,
Not playing too clean.
Not playing too sloppy. But it comes down to, those attributes. And when someone gets a good gig, all of a sudden their value and their credibility goes up. And people look at you differently. As opposed to guys that might not have a great gig that are fantastic players. There's really no difference. It's just one person got a wonderful opportunity, and you maximize it, and you do the most and try to get as much out of from your opportunity as you can for as long as you can. That's what I tried to do with the Travis gig, realizing that all gigs come to an end, and you're only as good as your last performance. So you have to, I equate, when I do clinics, I talk about the correlation between sales and music. You have to service accounts. You have to let people know that you're there. You're still alive. You're still out there. And it can be really hard. It's a balancing act, especially if you have a family.
Right.
I made a special effort when I was working with Travis to sort of keep my in-town contacts open so I can continue to do the session thing. And I tried to instigate other playing opportunities.
Well, and his schedule allowed you to do that.
I was very fortunate, yeah. With the Oaks, not so much because they work a lot, but I try to take advantage of the time on the road and book clinics, so I can keep doing that sort of thing. I like sharing information, inspiring young people and older drummers. I think that's really important.
How many clinics are you doing on average? Or is it hard to say?
I'd say I think I may have done 10 so far this year. I may end up with 15 or 16.
Okay.
It just sort of depends on scheduling where we end up playing, and I'm so fortunate. I've got, I'm not paid to say this, but I have such great relationships with the companies that I endorse. I've been with Gretsch 15 years. I've been with DW Pedals for 15 and Zildjian, and everybody is just really great as far as supporting me being out there. And I try to do a good job, and I'm a goodwill drumming ambassador. But it all starts with people that actually believe in you and support you and allow you to be able to do that.
Right.
And I've I can't say enough about the companies that support that and believe in me. It's really cool.
And
it's a privilege.
Did those endorsements come as a result of the Travis Tritt gig?
Yes, absolutely. I had a drum head deal with a different company and a drumstick deal, just from utilizing the resource of having Summer NAMM in Nashville. It was a great opportunity to meet reps and stuff. And even though I wasn't established with any big time touring act, I was able to meet some people and build a relationship.
Yeah.
So when I did get the Travis Tritt gig, I had already known some of these people in place.
The groundwork was laid.
Yeah, it was great. It wasn't like there was no association, there was no relationship. It wasn't just some crazy kid calling on the phone saying, "Hey, I got this gig." People had already known me, and that's really an important part of the business.
Right.
Relationships and
I've heard that before, where somebody was saying, "Introduce yourself. Reach out to these people. You may not have something to offer them."
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, "Hey, I want to endorse your product." It means, "Hey, this is what I'm doing, just introducing myself."
Yeah, just get on there.
Making them aware. Because I think there's also the other side of it where if you ask maybe too early or you approach them too early, they may be like, "You're not ready. This is not, and you're wasting
right.
my time."
Yeah.
And I think that's been covered as well. But the way you have approached it, or what worked well for you was,
I got on the radar.
Exactly.
Yeah. And today, now with social media, it's so different. Back then, it was a business card, a handshake, and you sort of were.
Do you think it's more? Do you think it's easier now, and thus it takes that human element away from it, or do you think that it's with social media it should be? Just, I don't know if I'm asking this question right.
I would say it's less personable now.
Okay.
It's not as there's a positive side with social media where someone actually can look at what's going on in somebody's career. But as far as really getting a vibe and a feel for them from a personality standpoint, you know how it is when you meet somebody. There's you feed off of their energy. You know what kind of person they are.
Yeah.
And I think companies want that good vibe.
Yeah.
It's not only about being a great player.
So if you have a temper tantrum with the bass player, you're not going to post that on YouTube.
No, I would probably not recommend that. It would be bad. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You can filter out things. You can have, this is my performance, this is that I'm going to show and I'm going to share.
Yeah.
Everything else you don't know about. But,
that's right.
Yeah. So you did that for 9 years. Is there?
Yeah.
How did that come to an end, or what was the?
You know,
He found out you were a Steelers fan.
yeah, exactly. He kind of cut work. He had gone through a situation where the label that he was on Sony for the majority of the time I was with him, and he signed with an independent label, and that label folded, and they were going through some difficult times there. And for a few years we were on salary, so it really didn't matter how much we worked. Yeah. And then the last year, the salary went away, and we just weren't working very much. Yeah. And it was sort of, there was writing on the wall. I just, it was time. There was a point, I would say, in the summer. I left in August of '09. In the middle of the summer, I remember being on stage, and my spirit was just blank. There was no inspiration. It was gone. Yeah. And I knew, it's like, okay, it's time, And I asked a lot of advice to a lot of people, and everyone thought I was crazy, but I really felt in my spirit God was leading me out of that gig. And I thought, and I'm not a real religious person, but I am a very spiritual person, and I try to stay in tune and have discernment with those sort of things in my life and in my career especially, because you can't really get God's blessing, the best that He has for you, if you're not willing to do what He's pulling you towards, right, or pulling you away from.
Sure. Sure.
So my wife was in agreement, and it was insane because that meant she had to go back to work full time, which that was another great opportunity. She wasn't working full time; she was home with our kids a lot. So there was going to be a really big change in the way we were living,
right? And
it was a tough transition, but I know it needed to happen. Mm-hmm. There was some lean times, but strangely enough, I left that gig and I ended up working with Pam Tillis. I was just offered the gig, and then I worked with Lee Greenwood. I subbed for a great drummer named Andy Hull. I was Andy Hull's sub on Lee Greenwood's gig, and Ty Herndon, another great artist. Yeah. So when Andy became too busy, I was Andy's sub. So Andy was gracious enough to recommend me and put me to work. He's great guy, great.
He is, and I got to know him briefly, and just reconnected through Facebook, and haven't connected beyond that. But again, there's just maybe a positive of social media to kind of like reconnect with somebody I haven't seen for a long time.
Yeah, real busy.
But want to.
Busy guy. He's really lucky, and just a fine player and a great guy. So, and then I worked for about 6 months with Joe Diffie during a lull with the Travis Tritt gig. I can't remember, 2000, 2006, 2007. We had some time off, and I went out and worked with Joe Diffie. And a lot of those gigs were based on the fact that I had credibility working with Travis.
Nice.
And they all came after I was established, and my name was associated with his.
Mm-hmm. But they could see the work that you've done. They could hear you, and
sure. So that was real helpful. So I got busy right away doing a lot of different stuff, and then tried to stay in town again to do that thing, which is it's a tough road to hoe. And having the Travis gig, I was really spoiled to play with a great band and play great songs every night. Yeah. And then to go, and this is no riff on guys that do sessions. Everyone wants to be a session player. Most everyone in this town.
Right.
But I remember a great quote that I read from Larry London, and he said he only liked 10% of what he ought to record. So 90% of what he recorded, he wasn't really fond of. Mm-hmm. And another great drummer that was very inspiring when I first moved to town, I met him before I moved to Nashville, actually, Greg Stocky. He had played with Lori Morgan and Marty Stewart and Billy Bob Thornton's band. And he was one of the drummers that I met before I moved to town. That when I was living in Florida, I met him, and he was really cool about staying in touch with me and helping me when I first moved to town.
Okay.
And he had told me something, because Greg has played on some great records, and he's just a fantastic drummer. Great touch and feel, and so musical, and always plays the perfect part. You know, he sort of had the same opinion that I had, that, you know, staying in town and just playing on demos, mostly bad songs, is sometimes not really overly inspiring, especially when you go from the gig with Travis Tritt and you're playing these hits every night.
Right.
So I knew at that point that I really wanted to be able to have a balance, you know. And during that time, it was somewhat hard, and it still is.
Yeah.
You know, there are more drummers that are balancing between the two than when I first moved to town. Like in '95, either you were a studio guy or a road guy.
Yeah.
Now that's changed a considerable amount.
It has.
But the guys that are established, that stay in town, those are the guys that get the calls, you know?
Right, right.
So it's hard to still break in.
I know there's times when people get a road gig and they said, well, don't tell anybody that I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't want it to, you know.
Yeah.
But then you turn on TV and you see them on Good Morning America. Like,
Yeah.
Sorry, man. But
And
I can see you.
I did that when I first got the Travis gig, you know, because there was a few producers and a few session leaders that I didn't want to know that I was away. And, you know, and unfortunately, when they found out, they just stopped calling. They just thought, well, he's going to be gone all the time, which, you know, whatever.
But you made an effort to keep in touch with
Yeah, I really tried.
people.
And I still try. You know, you have to.
Yeah.
It's not easy sometimes, but, you
Right.
know, you can't expect what you don't do. If you want people to know that you're still alive,
Right.
you got to be banging on their door,
Right.
you know.
So the Oak Ridge Boys, the Oaks.
The Oaks.
As you mentioned at the beginning, that came up as a result of the bass player that
Yes.
you knew from Travis.
Yeah, Scotty Simpson, great player.
Great, great. And so he's on that gig now?
Yeah.
Okay, he's been doing that. And we sometimes talk about endorsements. I just want to make sure that you mentioned Gretsch and Zildjian, DW Pedals.
Mm-hmm.
Who else?
Evans Drumheads,
Drumheads,
and Vader Drumsticks.
and Vader Drumsticks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get into those looking for advice on getting into endorsements. I don't know if anything more needs to be said. You had that relationship started. We discussed that, and then the Travis Tritt gig, because now you had something to offer them as well.
Yeah, without a doubt.
That. Okay.
I also use Pearl Hardware too. I should
Okay.
mention that. That's
Pearl Hardware.
sort of a, you know, there's a few guys in town that were fortunate enough to have just hardware deals. I know myself and Pat McDonald, and I believe we're the only two left, but there was a short period of time in the early 2000s where artist relation assistant to Mike Ferris, Mike Ferris is the head artist relation guy for Pearl, but Derek Wolford was his assistant, and he was very instrumental in getting guys in Nashville that just wanted to use hardware recognized and signed up as endorsers just for hardware, which was really cool. And I still use their stuff. Primarily, at the time when I first signed with Gretsch, they didn't have much hardware. You know, they had Gibraltar, and I wasn't crazy about. Gibraltar has made a lot of improvements since then. But I was always a Jeff Pocaro fan of the rack. The rack system is still the bomb. So I wanted my kit to look like Jeff's, even if it was Gretsch.
Well, and that's another thing I wanted to bring up was in this age where, and I play a 4-piece kit primarily, sometimes a second floor tom, but that's been my setup for the last 15, 16 years. Your setup, it seems, I'm trying to remember, did you have 3?
I did at one point. When I was with Travis, I did 8x10, 8x12, 9x13, basically the Porcaro setup.
Yeah.
And I did that for a long time. And in 2010, I ruptured my Achilles tendon, so I couldn't use my right foot.
Wow.
So I dropped the 13, and I set up an X-hat where the 13 would be, and I used a slave pedal. So I was using my left foot to play the kick drum, and I just used an X hat to play. So I did that for a good 6 months at least, for a while.
Did you ever use your left foot as a...
No, I couldn't move it. And there was a good 6 months of recovery time that I had to go through. Yeah, it was a really rough time for me.
Did you tell anybody in the band? Or were you just like...
at that point, I was with Pam Tillis, so they were very gracious and said, the gig is yours. Just let us know when you can come back. So obviously, I had to take a lot of time off, and I wasn't working at all. There was a few gigs around town that I was able to do when I was finally able to walk and drive. Wow. I had to wear a boot, and so I did a few gigs, just to be able to say I could, and it was a great time. It wasn't a great time. It was a good time to develop my left foot,
right? Right.
So that was real interesting. So when I did that, I got so used to an offset 10, the 12 being in front of me as my primary tom, and the hi-hat being where it was, and then my ride cymbal didn't move, and then I had 2 floor toms. So I really liked the feel of how that setup was, and I liked the spread between the toms, the 2-inch, 10, 12, 14, 16. So this part of this year, Gretsch sent me a 9x13 to match my kit. And I set it up, and I tried it for 2 months. And it was great. And I just threw it up there, and I practiced a little bit at home. And it made me think different. I liked the middle tom, the 13 being the middle tom, tonality-wise, between the 12 and the 10, and then the 14 and 16. And it was cool, but I just didn't feel at home like I did with the ride cymbal where it was. And it wasn't so much the placement of the ride cymbal. I just, it just had a different vibe. Everything was so comfortable the way it was.
It's amazing how that can change everything.
And, it was me trying to be Jeff again. And I love Jeff, but I'm Dave Northrup. I'm not Jeff Pocaro,
Wait a minute. Really?
It's very obvious, Look at my discography, So it's
Well, that's what I was wondering is it seemed that the setup was very similar to Jeff's.
Yeah, it was with the 13 for sure. And even without the 13, it's still very, very similar, But it's just there's just a different flow on the kit. I remember seeing a great DVD. I love Billy Ward. Great.
Yeah.
He lives here in town. I had a chance to meet him one time.
He lives in town?
Yeah. You should probably try to hook up with him. I have his information. Billy, I'm giving you a plug.
Oh, I would love to talk. I love his book.
So
gosh,
and I had one of his videos, and he talked about agronomics and your drum kit and how the way he has his setup is he's able to move, flowing his hands and just moving his torso around the kit, and not having to extend his elbows, which makes a great deal of sense. And the way I have my kit set up now is sort of based on that principle, and including the 13 was taking me out of that ability just to move freely with just slightly moving my torso and not even extending my elbows.
What's so funny is it's interesting that my son and I went to see Rush this last tour, and Neil comes out with 2 kits. The one he's been using for the last 20 years, and then the first one, and just ergonomically, I'm thinking he changed all that stuff, and then to see this old kit that he brings out for the fans. Remember this kit? Remember this big silver?
Wow!
And you're just like, that's got to be crazy to do the first half of the show on this kit that works well, that got him going. Through with lessons and
transition
to that, to going back to this.
That's insane.
Weird,
that's really cool to be able to.
That's show business for you.
Yeah, man. It's great to be able to be that well versed and play as
and to have
great
somebody
on
set
both.
your stuff.
What's that?
And have somebody set your stuff up.
Yeah, that's
real.
Check, yeah.
2 biggest kits in the world.
I know, that's awesome. I became a student of Jeff Pocaro, if you will, just because of all the tracks that he played on that I gravitated towards because of his feel and his groove. One of the tragedies I think today with young drummers is everyone is just after a download, where our generation, we bought records. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably a good 80% of what I own I bought because of who played on it.
Right.
And that goes into researching,
mm-hmm.
Who's playing on stuff.
Right.
And that's part of your responsibility. It's part of our tutelage as players to know who's playing on what. Yeah. And that's it's sort of an absence today, which is unfortunate.
And that brings me up to a point. I had a young drummer, Tanner, and I don't remember Tanner's last name, but he reached out to me because he's been listening to the podcast, and he's from Arizona, and he wants to move to Nashville. Well, he and a friend of his were in town visiting, and he goes, "Hey, can we meet for coffee and just want to pick your brain?" I was, "Well, I'll tell you what I know, and then we can chat about whatever else."
Yeah, sure.
But it was real nice for him to ask, and we sat down and we talked, and I mentioned some drummers that he didn't know, and he wants to get into the scene in Nashville. But he also said that he discovered Nick Buda through the podcast because of the subtitle, again, Taylor Swift.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, and he's 22, 23, and he goes, "I like Taylor Swift, man." I was like, cool. Well, he seems like that age where, he could probably wrap his head around what she was doing, all the different records. He goes, "I love this one record." And then to find out that Nick was on it and put the pieces together, but he didn't know that before.
Yeah.
Because of the download. And I said, well, listen, here's what you need to do, man. Find these records or whatever's on your phone or your iPod or whatever you're listening to music. Go to AllMusic.
Research,
find out. And then, because that's what we did.
Yeah, we
had
studied.
the CDs, we had the records, we had that. And I was reading the liner notes constantly.
Me too.
Who's on here?
Where it was recorded, producer. I got into producers and sounds and stuff. And
you have to take that extra step.
Yeah,
now.
without a doubt.
And I know that there's a lot of listeners to this podcast that are his age and trying to get advice. But that's how you follow and digest the style and identify the drummer with the style and the feel. So
I'm a Mike Stern fan.
Yeah.
Because of Dennis Chambers and Peter Erskine. I'm a John Schofield fan.
Yep.
Because of Dennis Chambers. I'm a Joe Sample fan because of Omar Hakim. Mm-hmm. These players, and Dave Weckl, of course. I'm a Chick Corea fan.
Yeah.
Kelly Yuta fan because of some of the first recordings I heard of John Patitucci.
Mm-hmm.
Or rather, I'm a Patitucci fan because of some of the recordings that he did with Vinny. And I was following these drummers. They were huge influences on me and on my playing, and I wanted everything I could get my hands on, because those guys, I was gravitating towards them. And if there's music that young players are hearing today, they need to do the same thing. There's Josh Freese is all over the place. Abe Laboriel Jr. is all over the place. Matt Chamberlain. I'm a huge Matt Chamberlain fan. They're all over the place. These guys are
up in every podcast.
Yeah, they're playing on all these records, and young players need to know these guys, man.
Oh, I'm a Fiona Apple fan because of Matt Chamberlain.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah.
Steve Jordan is another one.
Oh, yeah,
it's just like, my gosh.
Yeah.
It's part of your responsibility as a player, and it's only going to enhance your ability to further your education as a player.
Right.
Stylistically.
Yeah. There's sometimes you can find a player and the artist that it's just a joy when you listen to Abe Laboriel play on those live records with, Paul McCartney. You're thinking, well, this is the best of both worlds. I'm listening to the Beatle and I'm listening to Abe, and the combination of the two is amazing.
One of the best records I have with Abe is a Steve Lukather album. It's called Ever Changing Times.
Yeah, isn't there some videos of him recording that record?
Yeah, I think there might be.
Yeah.
But talk about a guy that really took his influence of Jeff Pocaro and put his twist on it. Because it's Abe's intensity and ginormous groove, but with the articulation of Porcaro. It's really exceptional record. Yeah.
I don't know. I remember seeing him tracking something for Steve Lukather. And,
yeah, it probably was
seeing
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, him
And talk about personality and the sounds of drums, the marriage between the two. To me, when I see him, I could see Abe walking down the street and be like, I can hear that guy. I can hear his groove. I can guess what it's going to be because it's big. It's just, you're describing him.
Well, I've never met him, but I know some people that have, and he's just got such a great personality. Yeah. He's just such a humble and, vibrant guy, and that comes out in his playing. It goes back to that thing we were talking about. I think players play their personality.
Right. Well, during your clinics, do you ever get into, like, hey, if you want to make a career out of this, here's a couple things to keep in mind, or here's a couple things on a checklist you want to mark off?
Yeah, very similar to what Greg talked about last night. If you want to make a living doing this, you have to be able to play a lot of different styles, and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're practicing a lot of swing that you're going to become a great swing player or you're going to get a lot of swing gigs, but the vocabulary that you get to establish playing a different genre of music only enhances perhaps the genre that you really like to play. And what I mean by that is, if you're not a great shuffle drummer, well, you can't really work. But spending time being able to shuffle well will help your rock playing if that's who you are.
Cross-pollinate.
Yeah, man.
Cross-pollinating. Talked about that.
So it's so important, especially if you want to even remotely consider doing sessions. On one session alone, as you know, you might have to do a traditional train beat with brushes.
Yeah.
You may have an open hi-hat, intense rock groove. You may have something with a little bit of a contemporary flavored Latin thing with, maybe a samba. You might have something that's more of a blues, raw shuffle, a two-handed thing. If you don't have experience or background playing those styles of music, then you're not going to really excel at a session that will call for all that.
Right.
So it's important to be able to.
And it's super fun.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I worked with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who was doing some co-producing and engineering as well for a songwriter, and she was just all over the map. And he's like, you maybe want to kind of consolidate some of these styles and, for this one record. And I was like, no, let her do it. This is fun. We're doing brushes and we're treating the drums with tape and all this stuff. And then we're just rocking out the next thing.
That's cool.
And pulling on, it's like, I'm just thinking to myself, just let her go.
Yeah, let her do her thing. Yeah.
This is killing me.
That's really cool.
I was watching a video of clinic that you were doing. In the clinic, and I think it's a few years old, there was that side video or that window where it had your foot.
Oh, yeah, right on.
And it was cool. And one of the things you were doing that slide thing. We don't talk a lot about, we don't get into gear, we don't get into technique, but I have to just make an aside to this and try and figure out if you are consciously have a technique that you use with your right foot that you worked on, especially since your injury, because now I'm seeing this in new light. And maybe it was before your injury.
Yeah, it was definitely before my injury.
Okay.
That was just something I picked up from the Jeff Pocaro video,
Okay.
The Hot Licks video that he initially put out. Now it's on Hudson Video, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a technique where he would slide his foot up the pedal to get fast doubles or diddles or whatever you want to call. And I sort of adopted that from watching him. And I tried to maybe, I don't want to sound full of myself, or take it to the next level, or just really work hard on it. And I didn't have much time or desire for the double pedal thing because the guys that I was really into was Gadd, which I know he uses it a little bit, and then Bonham and Stuart Copeland, which I know he does a little bit now, and Porcaro, who never used a double pedal. So I really tried to develop my single foot as much as I could.
That's why I think I'm asking, is because I'm coming from the same spot. I'm being a little selfish here.
No, it's good.
I just bought a double pedal recently because it was $100 for a DW 3000.
Oh, that's killer.
And so I'm like, I'll put it in my practice
work
room,
on
and
it,
if
why
I
not?
need to use it for teaching, it'd be great. And I had fun with it for a while, but really, I draw inspiration from many drummers that don't do the double pedal thing, and so I've never spent a lot of time on it. I love players that can do it really well.
Me too.
The double pedal.
Me too.
I love it.
Simon Phillips,
Yeah,
Steve Smith, those guys.
Yeah,
Pat McDonald.
Yeah, oh my gosh,
Yeah, he's
for sure.
ridiculous.
It's very fun. But I want to make sure that right foot is just killing.
Yeah, me too.
And kind of what you were doing to get it to that point.
I had I think it might have been Frank Briggs that I had this practice routine when I lived in Florida, and I still do it now to sort of maintain. But I would take on my foot, I would do with a metronome, singles, doubles, triplets, and 16th notes, and I would go back and forth. I'd do a grouping of singles, then I'd go to eighth notes,
Okay.
quarter notes, triplets, then 16ths.
Gotcha.
And I would do it at various tempos and varying intensity levels.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And I would also do the same with my left foot with the hi-hat, just to sort of spend time. We spend so much time developing our hands.
Right.
I tried to do the same thing with my feet.
Right.
Not so much to be able to play blazing fast, but to be able to have endurance with my feet. And I think because of that, I was able to develop some of the fast sliding up and down footwork that Jeff Pocaro did, and that I was able to steal from him from his video. And I play that a lot, but with the Oaks gig, I find myself floating back and forth between heel up and heel down, and it just sort of depends on the song and the dynamic of the song.
Yeah.
So somebody in my clinic once asked me, "Do you do heel up or do you do heel down?" And I said, "Yes, I do both. It just sort of depends."
Yes, next.
Yeah,
Wait.
And I know that I think with the Travis Tritt gig, I majority played heel up all the time because it was really intense.
Yeah.
Even when I did, the ballad stuff, and that was just kind of habitual. But I think as I've got a little older, I think I've relaxed my foot a little bit more, and it may have had something to do with my accident and coming back recovery wise.
Is there something you did recovery-wise once you got out of the boot?
Yeah, it was a tough time, man. I got out of the boot and I put my foot on the kick drum pedal and couldn't move it. Oh, yeah. It was really emotional. It was hard, and I just started slowly. It's sort of a blur now, but it was just a matter of starting over. The good thing was the surgeon that I had was awesome, and he said, you're going to have muscle memory. It's going to come back. But at first, you have the fact that you have muscles that you haven't been using for a long time, and you're just going to have to take it slow. So I had the obvious exercises that I had to do to.
Were you doing just your foot, or were you also moving your hands as well?
I would move my hands too.
Combined.
Yeah. And it was a slow process, but I started by just doing singles and then slow doubles.
Say singles, you mean quarters to eighths to
Yeah.
16ths?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then sometimes just playing 4 on the floor.
Yeah.
Quarter notes.
Yeah.
And it was a slow process. The cool thing is, Nashville, such an incredible town. I had a lot of people reach out to me and help me. A great drummer and great personal friend, Austin Cucuruto, and a guy named Trey Cordell, 2 great drummers and great friends. They organized a benefit for me to help my family. It was very humbling.
Yeah,
Very humbling time in my life. But I would say at the end of every tragic situation, if you're able to pull yourself through it or allow God to help you pull through it, you become stronger on the other end. It's not a lot of fun while you're going through it.
No.
But
Especially when that's what you do.
oh yeah, and it was a tough time. But I'm happy to say that my foot's as strong as it's ever been. I run into people. It's like, hey man, how's the foot? I'm like, well, it's been 5 years. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you notice anything foot-wise, like shoes or anything like that you had to?
No, maybe initially, I know some guys wear those Skechers with the really small sole. I've always liked thick soles. I don't know why. And I think, honestly, I remember watching Dennis Chambers videos, and he used to have those big fat Nike high tops with the big sole. So I remember trying that. I was like, man, I like some separation between my actual foot and the pedal.
Yeah.
So nothing out of the ordinary.
Right.
Right.
So the rest of this year, you guys, are you still doing a Christmas tour?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I was talking to a friend last night, and we've got 21 dates in October, 21 dates in November, and 22 dates in December. And that's over 60 dates just in the last part of the year. And we've already done 74.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it is insane. I equate it to, it's sort of the Grateful Dead of old people. It's unbelievable. And, you can't help but think these guys have been around 42
Grateful
years.
Dying.
Yeah. The fan base is, strangely enough, obviously you have the diehard older Oaks fans, but you have a whole new generation of people that come out. And it's insane. They pack places all the time.
Oh, you guys, it was huge there.
It's nuts. Yeah.
Some of the people we would see at the Strawberry Fest, we could get kind of close. We couldn't get close with the Oak Ridge Boys. We had to sit back.
It's just a sea of white hair, But it's it's great, man.
And next year is looking to be as busy.
Yeah. They are actually. This is a really cool side note. Well, it's not really a side note. It's actually a major thing for them. They're being inducted in the Country Music Hall of Fame in October.
Oh my gosh, that's
and somebody said, "Man, that'll be great. That'll be probably accelerate the workload." I'm like, I hope not. I don't know how it's going to accelerate the workload. They work enough as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really a cool honor to be around guys that have been in the business so long, and to see how down to earth and cool. They're so approachable. It's like, working for your like it's working for a family business. They're all just awesome,
That's, man, and that goes so far.
Yeah, it's really
especially if you're going to be away from your family and doing all these other things.
Yeah.
That vibe has to be great.
Yeah, they make it easy.
You're slammed, man, and and just knowing your schedule, it means a lot more, and that you took the time to come here and talk to me, man. I appreciate it. And
I'm so grateful to be a part of this. I thank you for having me, man.
Yeah. I'm excited to share. I think people are gonna love it. So
cool,
but man. Thanks, David.
Thanks, dude.
You,
thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
So there you go. There was David Northrup. It was a great interview for me. After the interview, after I hit stop on the recorder, we ended up talking for about another half an hour. I just talked about some personal concerns, and David shared some advice that was really awesome. And of course, halfway through the conversation, I'm thinking, this should be on tape. So I apologize I didn't get that, but David was a great hang and just offered some really good advice, and I hope that you guys benefit from it as much as I did. It was great. Many, many thanks to Mike Jackson again for his help in getting this together. Also want to thank his brother Robert for going to Indianapolis with me yesterday. We had a great interview with at the Percussive Art Society headquarters in Indianapolis with Jeff Hartso, an old friend of mine. We talk about PASIC 2015 coming up in November, and that interview is going to be out soon with some video. Very excited about that. Got a quick Twitter that I want to read from Kevin Murphy. You might know Kevin from one of our past interviews. He says, at Working Drummer, Morrow is the dope show. Love it. He and Q are the Yodas of my drumming world. Nice choice. Hashtag Legos. Hope you all understood what he was saying, talking about Greg Morrow in that interview. Keep those tweets coming, comments on YouTube, comments on the iTunes page. That's really helpful. So anyways, everyone, thanks for listening, and hope to see you around. See ya.